It's been pretty amazing once people get involved and see beyond the homeless thing. It definitely changes the way people look at it.
Hey friends, what's good? Today, I want to take a different approach in talking about the issue of homelessness. And rather sharing about people who are living on the inner city streets as we typically think, I want to talk about the growing frequency of people who are living in homelessness out in the wilderness, out in the desert, and in our forests. And we'll do so by sharing a recent public radio news story that highlights what's going on public lands. But I also want to share parts of a recent interview that I did with a nonprofit called Focus on the Forest. Now, their mission is to help clean up the forest and trash that builds up in the forest. But also, they encounter people who are living in homelessness, and they have a positive story about how they're trying to help them. Now, I want to start out by sharing a Boise Public Radio news story by Madeline Bagg. And she begins the story with an interview from Becky Anders from the Bureau of Land Management in Idaho, who is on the scene with an individual who has been there for 2 months. Now, keep in mind, camping limit is 14 days at any one spot.
This trailer has been around for about 2 months.
And we've been patiently working with them as they work through their situation and try to find more sustainable housing.
They talk with Ranger Brian Adams, not to be confused with the singer, about this problem. Here's what he has to say.
BLM officer Brian Adams says it's increased a lot.
Tenfold at least. It's something we deal with in the field every single day.
And this is where it gets more personal because there's not just individuals, but families involved with children.
At another location, there are several vehicles, some functional, others not. Adams says it's a family with kids, something he's seeing more of.
I have a daughter, she's 6, and seeing that the kids in that situation, it's heartbreaking. They shouldn't be worrying about housing issues when you're 6 years old. You should be worried about playing.
The story goes on to talk about some of the history around people living in homelessness on public lands, including in the 1990s in Oregon when there was an area of Forest Service land that was set up for people to camp who didn't have homes. In 2008, during the housing crisis, BLM noticed a spike in people living on those public lands. And over the last 3 years during the pandemic, there has been a growing number of people living in homelessness on public lands because of the spike in housing prices. I want to share with you part of the conversation I had with Sean Nielsen with Focus on the Forest and what he talks about as far as forest neighbors that he encounters.
The thing about the homeless, we call them forest neighbors. Because at any given time, there's 50 to 60 living up in Rampart Range where we live. And some of them are, it's bad choices. Some of them are bad situations. And not all of them that live up there are destroying it. I mean, there's a lot of them that keep it clean. Some just don't care. We call them the 1%. But the partnership with the Forest Service essentially is the Forest Service has to tag them. You can stay 2 weeks in a single spot, or 10 days, I think it is, and then you have to move. Mm-hmm. And if they don't move, the Forest Service can go in and tag their camp for removal. So then if they do or they abandon it, and then we come in and we can clean it up.
In addition, Sean shared some kind of understated but still very powerful comments about how Focus on the Forest is helping the forest neighbors, the people living in homelessness in the forest, work through their situation while his organization also works to keep the public lands clean.
But the Forest Service is really good about not kicking somebody when they're down.
Yeah.
The same as we are. We're not out to hurt people. We're out to keep our forests clean is the main goal. So we try to work with the Forest Service and work with the forest neighbor population. Sometimes we've gone up and done trash service for them.
Okay.
Sometimes they've hosted their own cleanups. It's been pretty amazing once people get involved and see beyond the, the homeless thing. It definitely changes the way people look at it.
Friends, I would love to know what your takeaway is from this story. Please enter that down below. I'd love to hear from you. I think for me, my biggest takeaway is that people are experiencing homelessness in a lot of different ways. They could be living out in the desert in a place like Idaho, or they could be living in the mountains and in the forest in a state like Colorado. Not necessarily on the streets of the inner city like we often think about. My other takeaway is there are people and organizations who are working really hard to try to help those who are living in homelessness, to help them rebuild their lives. And you can see an example of that in this recent video that I did. Or you can watch other inspiring work that's going on in our community by checking out this video. Hey, either way, you're watching What's Good.